Juliet 10U. When our special guest today turned 50, instead of celebrating, she had a massive physical and mental breakdown.
It's something that could happen to any of us. So to help us understand, please welcome our very own clinical psychologist, Jo Lamble.
Hi, Jo. How are you?
Hello, Jo.
Morning.
So this is something that, as I'd said, could happen to any one of us.
Well, it certainly could. And on Friday we had a viewer who wrote in who was worried about having a nervous breakdown. This morning we're going to meet a woman who was really glad she did, because it led to a diagnosis of anxiety and depression that has changed her life for the good.
Wow. Well, let's hear a little bit, about Bernadette and her story.
I had no tolerance for anything. I was short-tempered. I was tired all the time. All I wanted to do was stay in bed. I didn't want to get up and do anything. And I just felt really unappreciated and terrible.
They're not exactly the words you'd expect to hear coming from a woman who seemingly has everything. But for Bernadette Jansen, that's exactly how she saw her life. It was a massive physical and mental breakdown during her 50th year that changed everything. Over 4 years, she turned a rundown cafe and catering business into a huge commercial success, but it came at a heavy cost.
At the point where I had turned 50, I just got really sick, and I had a diagnosis of early cancer, and that just completely freaked me out because I just started to reflect on what I'd been missing out on. I was a workaholic, and I was really just working myself to the bone.
She decided to make some dramatic changes. She sold the business and focused her energies on getting healthy and spending more time with her family. She'd achieved both of these goals, and yet she was still struggling. Even though she thought she'd fixed the problem, Bernadette was still drowning in a sea of anger, guilt, worthlessness, and anxiety.
Bernadette, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ita.
You're in very safe hands, so over to you, Jo.
Gosh, it sounded like you had and still do, but you had a very busy life. Do you think you were filling your life with all these distractions to sort of block out how you were feeling?
I definitely was driven, I guess that's the word, so that's probably what was going on. I always had something going on, and that was something that I created.
And so you've gone from being a nurse, being a full-time mum to 4 kids, and then renovating your own place, and then flipping other houses, and then taking on a really messy catering business and turning it around.
Yes, looking back, it probably wasn't that smart.
But at the time, did you think, geez, I can do a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're feeling pretty good about all these things you're doing.
Yeah.
So how did you know that you weren't coping?
Well, looking back, I had signs very early when I actually had a panic attack on an aeroplane when I was having my first baby, and at the time I didn't know what it was. I actually didn't get on a plane for another 10 years after that because I couldn't face it. And then I had postnatal depression after my second baby. And then I seemed to be coping okay, but it was really only once I got around the 50 age or started leading up to it and I was working so hard that the symptoms really set in.
Do you think menopause had anything to do with it?
Oh, yes.
Because often women do.
They do.
When they go through menopause, that the anxiety can really kick in and depression. And it's also, you've got such a really important message this morning, Bernadette, because that sort of avoidance of having a panic attack on a plane and then avoiding flying, thinking, okay, well, that's under control, and then having some postnatal depression and then just, okay, that's in the past.
Yeah.
You have been telling me that your children and the husband thought you were psycho.
Yes.
What were they?
That was...
How dare they do that?
I think they were right, actually. But,
really?
Yeah, at the time. And I think that was at the time when I really wasn't coping, and I was...
But what were you doing that made them say you were psycho?
I just was very short-tempered. I wanted to control everything and couldn't. I was worried about them. They were teenagers, at that stage where they were starting to go out on their own, and I was the overprotective mother, but I was overly so, and I basically, we had a lot of conflict because of that, and it was at probably the worst point. My oldest daughter said to me, "Mum, there's something wrong with you, and if you don't go and do something about it, I'm going to have to move out of home because I can't live with it.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Because it sounds, Bernadette, to like you were looking after everyone else around you, but not yourself. You're ignoring what was going on inside by doing lots of work and lots of. I mean, it's something I can relate to, definitely.
Well, I think also I'd taken on really a lot, and I had to really keep paddling to stay afloat. I knew that I wasn't coping. I didn't really understand why, because I'd in the past been able to do anything. And so it was a bit of a shock. And even when I did find out that that's what was at the bottom of it, I sort of couldn't believe it. I thought, it can't be right. Yeah.
Well, Bernadette, we're going to hear more about your story right after this very short break. You are watching Studio Team U, and at 50, Bernadette suffered a mental and physical breakdown, but she believes it was one of the best things that ever happened to her. It was such a great sort of approach, really. How did you get help, and what did you do, Bernadette?
So I mentioned that my daughter gave me an ultimatum, so I chuffed off to the doctor, and basically she said that I was exhibiting typical symptoms of depression, sent me to a counsellor, prescribed some medication called Effexor, and within about 3 weeks I felt like the lights had been turned on. So it was an amazing experience, really, and I realised that I'd been suffering for a very long time and not been aware of it. So
Is it common, Joe, for people to suffer from depression and not realise it?
It is, and that's why it's so fabulous you've come on this morning, Bernadette, because we can all relate, I think a lot of us can relate to being really busy and being distracted, to losing it with our kids at times and snappy with our partners, but it's when it just keeps going and you're constantly like that, and if your teenage child's giving you an ultimatum saying that you are impossible to live with, which is what we're meant to be saying to them, then yes, then that's the key to go and get some help. And so now you've gone from somebody who would be in the fetal position when you're trying to speak in front of people, to now you give talks. Bernadette's a renovator. She's got the School of Renovating. You've got your first conference coming up. Tell us how that feels.
Life is pretty amazing. I feel like my life has just begun, like in the last few years, because suddenly it's not that things weren't possible before, but they were always clouded by the anxiety. I made very bad decisions when I was stressed, particularly with buying property. Well, not so much buying it, but, how I managed the actual process. So now I have clarity around my decisions.
So you show people how to renovate properties, is it?
Yeah, so I share that with...
But you do have a lovely lisp, I must say. love the lisp. There you are. She's made a good lisp, can you?
I did mention to Jo she'd be sitting in a lisp sandwich.
And I said, successful women have lisps.
That's
so that's
This is true. It's a secret weapon. Yeah, we're special.
You are indeed special. I think what you have done with your life is so inspiring for many other people, because many of us are impacted by depression and we don't realise, and we don't know how to get out of it or move forward. And you've very much done that.
Yeah, and I think
Thank
if
you,
anybody watching today is being told by those around them, hey, are you okay? There's something wrong, then listen to them and go and see your doctor.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Bernadette, and thank you, Joe.
Big thank you again for you sharing your story, Bernadette, because it takes real bravery and courage. Good on you. And if you do need some help, there is the Beyond Blue details on the screen. I can give them the thumbs up. They're an amazing organisation.
They certainly are.